Hey, fellow classic comic collectors! As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today, as promised, I'm going to talk to you about three comic book stores that I recently visited in Michigan. Before I jump into it, just want to remind you there's only a little bit of time left on my Kickstarter for Cthulhu vs. Uncle Sam, numbers 1 and 2, so if you haven't gotten those, your life is just not complete. But you can complete your life by going down below in the description field. There's going to be a link. You can go there, and then you've done it. You've leveled up. You've reached the peak. But now that that's out of the way, recently had to go to Michigan. Unfortunately, had a funeral that I had to attend. So it was kind of a rough trip. But one saving grace for me is that the way I relax in my happy place is comic book stores. So we found some time to get away from it all and go to some comic book stores. Not as many as I wanted to go to for reasons I'll get into in a minute, but we did get to a few comic book stores in Michigan. We flew into Detroit. Right outside of Detroit is Ypsilanti. And in Ypsilanti, there's a comic book store that we didn't get to, but I did eat at a really cool place I wanted to mention. It's a cafe called the Bomber Cafe, and it opened in the 30s, and Ypsilanti is the home of Rosie the Riveter, and so this whole place is all done up with World War II bomber themed stuff, with like original World War II uniforms on display, and models of all these World War II bombers, and all this Rosie the Riveter art and all this great stuff like that. So I wanted to mention that place, and the portions were massive. I love greasy spoon stuff. I'm a big fan of you get French toast with some hash browns and some bacon. Fantastic. So just wanted to mention that real quick. There was a comic book store just up the street, but we just didn't have time to get to that one. However, we were able to stop in nearby Ann Arbor, a big college town, and I love the vibe of college towns. It's right up my alley. Never been there before, and right in the heart of downtown, where all the cool stuff was happening, it's a place called Vault of Midnight. Now, Vault of Midnight, apparently there's like three different locations. I think there might be one in Dearborn. There's one in Detroit. But absolutely fantastic store. So up at the top level of the store, they had all the sort of cool stuff that you would want to have at a comic store in like a college town. So they had a ton of new stuff, but not just Marvel and DC. They had big sections of like indie comics, indie graphic novels, stuff like that. They had lots of omnibuses and trades that you could get. They had a bunch of trades like on discount. They also had manga and all sorts of stuff. And then when you go downstairs, huge game section, tons of board games and RPG stuff, like just tons and tons. And then a huge array of back issues, like a whole giant stretch. Now, they didn't have much in the way of back issues for me. Their back issues are stuff with like smattering of mid to late 80s, and then most of the back issues were 90s to present. And as you know, for the most part, I kind of have that stuff. The stuff I'm looking for from that era, I kind of already have. But I did find a couple things to buy, because off in the corner, they had a box of magazines, creepy, eerie, some of the early 80s heavy metal competitors, stuff like the Eclipse magazine, which I almost bought. But they had a bunch of Dragon magazines from the early 80s, which was right when I started getting Dragon magazines. So I bought 2 issues of Dragon. I want to show you here. Here's issue 80, $4 for this. I got this one just because it had such a great cover. Terrific cover. Number 80. They had a bunch. I was tempted to buy like all of them, except for I knew I didn't have room in the suitcase to bring them back home. So someone else will have to enjoy them. But I was really excited to get this. It's issue 86 of Dragon magazine, which was also $4. And the reason I was particularly excited for this is that I recognized the cover. This is an issue that I bought off the stands when it came out in 1984. It was right at the time when I got into comics, and we would go, my parents would bring me, they were in a bowling league, so we'd go to this bowling alley, they'd be bowling, I'd have to pass the time, they'd give me a couple bucks, Newsstand next door, old school like pharmacy thing with the spinner racks. And in addition to the comics, I would buy stuff like Dragon Magazine, and I had this issue. As soon as I saw the cover, I recognized it. So had to get that for big nostalgia reasons. So those are the only things I got at the store, but again, a great store, and the vibe in downtown Ann Arbor was super cool. So it's unfortunate we didn't have more time to stay there and look around, but it was really great. So after that, we went up to Lansing, Michigan, and in Lansing, we had an interesting comic experience. So if you go into Google Maps in Lansing, you're going to find 4 comic book stores pop up, and they're all within like 10 minutes of each other, so it's perfect. Unfortunately, we were there on a Monday, and those of you who are comic book store aficionados who go to a lot of comic stores know that a lot of comic stores are very small operations. A lot of them are single-person operations. And if you have a single person operating a store, it's going to be closed sometimes, and that's almost always on Monday and Tuesday. So they have their busy weekend, they take Monday and Tuesday off. And so the 4 comic stores that are listed in town, 2 of them were closed today I was there. So unfortunately, I couldn't get to them, and I can't tell you anything about them. There's a 3rd comic store I want to mention that's listed in the listings. It's called A&A Comics. I would read the listing carefully because it has the location and it has the hours, which the owner has updated. But it's actually a guy's house. And if you read the description, you're going to see a lot of comments from people that are like, hey, I showed up and it was just some guy's house. And he put his phone number in there. So basically when you get to his house, or before you go to his house, probably, you'll want to give him a call, and he'll bring you in to buy the comics because they're just in his house. Which, you know, is whatever. I'm an old school comic collector. We used to do that in the 80s, so whatever. It was fine. Except for, I didn't know that. I thought it was a comic store. We got there. It's some guy's house. I called the number. Even though it was listed during business hours, he wasn't actually home. There was no answer on the phone, so couldn't go in there either. So the 4 comic stores listed, I only got into 1. So let me show you what I bought at that store. It's called Summit. It's right downtown by the river, and it was another excellent comic book store that had a ton of back issues and all sorts of just sort of great gaming. That's like one side of the room is gaming stuff, and then the other side of the room is basically the comic books, right? And on the comic book side, they had some back issues that were priced whatever, mostly newer stuff. But they had some older stuff, I should say. They did have some Bronze Age stuff and some Silver Age stuff, just not a lot. But what they did have was reams of dollar bins, and I got a bunch of stuff out of those. So let me show you a couple things I got on both sides of this here. And if I had had more time, I would have spent more time. But first of all, you guys know how much I dislike swamp monsters, but for $1, I had to get this anyway because it's a Swamp Thing 100-page giant for $1. Now, this is Swamp Thing Giant number 1. And it's got something with Zatanna. It's got Phantom Stranger in it. Those are characters that I like. So I thought it was worth picking up for $1. Also, I mean, this is probably the sort of thing that I might give to one of you in a mystery box. Just a reminder, if you haven't signed up on my other video to get the 1,200 subscriber giveaway mystery box, when we get 1,200, we'll be giving that away. This may or may not be in there if I've had a chance to read it before then. But I'm keeping my eye out for that. So for $1, I couldn't pass that up. Another giant square-bound comic that I got dirt cheap is, and I don't collect Batman stuff, but I thought the cover was awesome. I think it's Steve Rude, and it's Detective Comics number 1000, and this is the 1930s variant. So they do a cool thing with these DC anniversary books where they've been having like a variant in the style of each decade, and I love the design of the Golden Age DC books. Absolutely love it, and the cover is so great. Now this has a cover price of $10. It's $9.99, and this just came out in May 2019, as you can see here. But it was only $3, and actually they had other ones that were super cool too. They had a 1970s version with a Bernie Wrightson cover that was also it was $4, and I almost bought that instead. But I thought, $3, giant, like, I don't know how big it is, but it looks like it's a 100-page square bound giant with the great cover, and it's $3, so I picked that up. Out of the dollar bin, you guys know how I like my indie books, the self-published books, and I also like things with Golden Age public domain characters. And here's a series I've actually heard of. This is from Caliber. A series that I've heard of but don't have any issues of is Big Bang Comics, which, as you can see, has a big Silver Age feel. So I'm looking forward to get that. That was in a dollar bin, so that was a no-brainer. Let's see. All right, now these are a bit of a pure nostalgia purchase. I'm not collecting this series, but I had these as a kid, and I have a kind of a renewed interest in them. But really, when I saw them, I was just like, oh yeah, I had those as a kid, got to get them. They're in really nice shape. I'm assuming they're all from the same collection because there was a whole run of them. Here is Dazzler 38. 39. 40. And 41. And these are all in really nice shape. $3 each. One of them was $5. The other was $3. So yeah, I got those. I had those all when I was a kid. They were some of the first comics that I got sort of in that first early batch in like 85, 84, 85. And I really liked them at the time. Didn't know really much about the X-Men at all. Didn't know who Dazzler was. Just was reading the series. Finally, last thing I got at the store, I mentioned again, I showed a couple things from the dollar bins. This one was the thing I was most excited to get out of the dollar bins. It's Life with Archie number 63. This is actually an issue that I was missing off of my checklist. It's an early appearance of the Archies. And this was the highest number issue of Life with Archie I was still missing. Now, the series started in 1958, ran until 1991, 286 issues. Before I got this, I was missing 13 of those. So now I'm down to 12 issues of Life with Archie. Once we get to 10, I'm going to do a video announcing an official quest to finish that run, and then I will show off all 286 issues. But I was really excited to get this out of a dollar bin. Now, I will say I haven't opened it yet. It feels like it might be a little light. Just a little. Like it's right on the edge. I can see from looking at it that there's a center fold that's loose, and I wonder if it's missing a wrap in the middle. But I haven't pulled it out yet, so I don't know for sure. But anyway, checking this off the checklist and getting that much closer to finishing a complete run of Life with Archie. So very exciting. So again, that was a really great store. Only one of the 4 comic stores worked out. However, here's the plot twist. As we were driving around, we had about 15 minutes left, and we were driving back to the hotel, and I was looking at the map, and I was like, you know what? There's a baseball card store there, a card store called All-Star Cards, and some of the reviews on Google mentioned comic books. So we decided to stop there, and I gotta tell you, it was kind of the mother lode. I could have easily spent another hour there. We only had about 15 minutes. I was racing through stuff. Basically, they had Silver Age, Bronze Age, Copper Age. They had a ton of stuff from the 60s and 70s and 80s, and the pricing system was super easy because they had a bunch of long boxes, $10 each. A bunch of long boxes, $5 each. A bunch of long boxes that were, I think, $3 each, or 3 for $5 if you bought it in bulk, right? And I asked the guy about the sorting, whatever. He said basically they just price them out and chuck them in the boxes. Now, whoever's pricing them has some idea what they're doing. But there was lots of really good deals in there, man. There was a lot of stuff. stuff that I didn't need for my collection, but I was like, man, this is really good. So, for instance, the bunch of issues of Fantastic Four in there, in the $5 box, that were early Bronze Age. So I'm talking around issue like 116, 118, 119, like around that period. Several of those, $5 each. In the $10 bins, there was a bunch of Silver Age stuff, Lois Lane issues, Superman, Detective, Batman, and I'm talking Silver Age stuff from the 60s, right? $10 each. I went through the $10 bins. I only got through half of the $5 bins. Didn't get to any of the $2 or $3 bins. And then there was another table over there that probably had 40 long boxes that were dollar bins. And I didn't get to look at any of those at all. So, I mean, I could easily have spent a whole hour there because there was so much stuff. But I got just a handful of really cool things that I'm very happy about. So let me show you what I got out of the $5 bins. Let me start with this one here because it's a totally bizarre comic. It's the second and last issue of just one of the dumbest comics. And I have the first one already. It's Todd Holton's Super Green Beret number 2. Again, I paid $5 for it. It is giant size. It's like a, I don't know, 52 or 64 page comic, and I've talked about this comic before because I do have a special interest in comics about the Vietnam. This one's absolutely lunatic premise, which is basically it's Billy Batson's Shazam, except for he's fighting in Vietnam. So Todd Holton is a kid who gets a magic green beret, and when he puts it on, he turns into an adult green beret that has superpowers, and the beret allows him to teleport from his like Ohio home in suburbia directly to Vietnam to fight people. And so it's just a kid with superpowers trashing the VC. It's just so tone deaf. It's one of the most tone deaf comics of all time. But I was really excited to get it. So now I have both issues of this, Todd Holton's Super Green Beret. I also got a couple just classic covers. These aren't titles that I collect or I'm particularly interested in, but classic covers. It's Supernatural Thrillers number 3 featuring the Valley of the Worm. It's a fantasy series adapted from Robert E. Howard with this absolutely fantastic Gil Kane cover. I've seen pictures of this comic before. I've always thought, Gil Kane was big into fantasy stuff. He had the indie comic Black Mark or whatever it was called that he did in the 60s. And he did the Sword of the Atom in the 80s and whatever. But here we are. You see 20-cent semi-frame. So this is probably 1973, I'm guessing. And just top-notch Gil Kane artwork there. Like, it's so good. That was $5. And it's in pretty nice shape. It's got a little creasing here, but it's mid-grade. And just looks gorgeous, so I was really excited to get that. And here's something that's also in really nice shape with a black cover. Nicer condition than that. Still mid-grade, but a little bit higher. Great black cover. I used to have a copy of this, but I got rid of it because it was really trashed. But here's a much nicer one. It's Doc Savage number 2 with this awesome Jim Steranko cover. A black frame cover, art by Jim Steranko. It's so great. Look at the the priestess in the background. It's so good. It's so good. So that was just $5 for that. So 2 classic covers from right in my wheelhouse. Early Bronze Age, 72, 73 with those. Couldn't be better. I mean, and again, $5 for those all day long. And here's something really exciting that I also got for $5. On my checklist, it's a 10-center. It's a 10-cent Archie that I needed for my Archie checklist. And it's Archie number 105. So this is probably around 1960, maybe 1959. The first code issue of Archie was, I think, around issue 77 or 76 or so. So that was 56. And so here we are, late 50s, I think, issue 105. I mean, it's not as nice a condition of those. It's definitely lower grade. It's more like a 3.5. Harry Lucy cover, though. And this is a really underrated period for Archie books. I mentioned in my previous video when I'd gotten issue 140 in another haul recently at a bookstore that I think is sort of the pinnacle of Archie books for me is from about 56 to like 66. But this era with these late 10-cent books, are, Archie issues from around number 90 to around number 119 or so, or 116, that area. It was a top-selling book, but they're not actually quite that easy to find, and there's a lot of great covers because Harry Lucy was doing them, and they're starting to, sometimes they can set you back a bit for some of those, so I was really excited to get this for $5. Again, all day long with this. If I could get any other 10-cent Archies from this period, from the late 50s for $5, I would buy them in a heartbeat. Finally, I only got one book out of the $10 bins, and I'll tell you up front, it's in really rough shape. The spine is split from the bottom all the way up close to the top staple, so about 2/3 to 3/4 spine split all the way up. So needless to say, it's really low grade. There's also a little bit of pen on the cover. But why did I buy something so beat up for $10? Well, check this out. It's Our Army at War number 86. Now, these days, Our Army at War 81 is considered to be a prototype Sergeant Rock. It used to be considered the first Sergeant Rock, but he went through several iterations before he became Sergeant Rock. 83 is now considered to be the first appearance of Sergeant Rock. So here we are, 83, 84, 85, 86. My hand was off screen. So the fourth appearance of Sergeant Rock here in Our Army at War, number 86, for $10. Now that's a deal, regardless of the grade. I don't actually collect this series anymore. There was a period where I was working on Our Army at War and I kind of gave up on it. It's just in terms of the DC War. I like Sergeant Rock, but in terms of the DC War titles, I lean towards the quirkier books like Unknown Soldier or the Losers or whatever. So I got rid of them. But I was really excited to get this. I may end up flipping this. I don't think there's a huge profit in it because the grade's so low. But it's worth more than $10, even in this condition. I think it's probably a $25 book. So I was just really, but money aside, it was just so cool to see this. I saw it in the bin, and I was like, wow, I can't believe this is in the $10 box. Fourth appearance, Sergeant Rock. It's so early that he's not even on the cover. So. It's a Sergeant Rock. It says down here, a new Easy Company Battle Tale, Tank 711. But Sergeant Rock isn't even on the cover. That's how early it is. They hadn't quite realized yet that he was the main star that needed to be on the cover. So that's it. That's the big haul. If you're in Lansing, again, there's 4 comic stores, but make sure that besides checking all those out, make sure you get to the All-Star cards because they've got the goods and it's cheap. And I would just wish that I had a chance to go through all the other boxes. But that was my little trip to Michigan. Let me know what you think down below. I'll see you next time.